matter of people versus Pursehouse. We have all jurors here, minus juror number 12. We have counsel here and the defendant, of course. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for indulging us. Unfortunately, as I stated, the defense attorney, when the defense attorney contracted COVID, and somebody on the prosecution team as well. And so they're better now. Mr. Franzel, I think, was a little sick, and I'm at the moment I have scratchy throat and coughing. I tested myself. I'm okay. I mean, you may see at times that I put on my mask, especially at sidebars and so forth. So I apologize, but thank you for indulging. And you know, these things you can't control, unfortunately, and you have to deal with it. I know we're going to lose some jurors. The alternate number 2 with the Italian trip and so forth. Some of you have planned conferences and so forth. We'll try to accommodate you with that, just so we can get everybody in here. Okay. Now, juror number 12, we've lost. Unfortunately, he became somewhat ill. I think it's semi-serious and so forth. Who did we get as an alternate, David? What, 3? Where's alternate number 3? Okay, you are now alternate number. Where's number 3? Are you 3?
Number 3 is getting confused about what we are. Number 3 is Judge.
Yes.
Last of 9964.
9964. Oh, okay. You take. Where's juror 12?
Juror 12 was the one that we just excused.
I know, but I mean 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you're in the right seat. How did you wind up in the right seat? Did you already know that?
No, I think he was. He needed to be close.
Oh, I was going to say that's amazing. Jeez. Okay. Oh, he did. Oh, that's right. He had because of problems. Okay, so you're juror number 12. Congratulations. We are prepared to go forward. We had a witness on the stand who is also sick, so we're going to take him out of order and call another witness in this place, and then take it from there. And I am aware. I have the calendar here, and a number of you have things to do. We're going to try to accommodate everybody, but you know these things happen, so bear with me, if you will. All right. Thank you. Okay, you may call your next witness.
The people call Miss Sarah Rollins.
Okay. Rollins, did you say?
Rollins, right?
Okay. Why did I have Broxton? That's somebody else.
There's another.
Oh, that's after that. Okay, Rollins. Ms. Rollins? Yes, if you could approach the witness stand down here, please. If you could raise your right hand and face the showman.
You solemnly state that the testimony you're about to give and the cause now pending before this court should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Please have a seat. Please state and spell both your first and last name.
My name is Sarah Rollins, spelled Sarahrollins.
All right. If any of you have a problem hearing here, raise your hand. I just asked if you do have a problem. Can you just lean into the microphone when you speak? Okay, if you have a soft voice.
Is that better?
Yes, that's better. Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate it.
May I inquire him?
Yes, please.
Hi, Miss Rollins.
Good morning.
Do you know Amie Harwick?
I do.
And how long have you known her?
If she were alive now, it would be 13 years.
And how did you two meet?
We met working at an event.
And as doing what?
We were serving ice cream sandwiches.
Now, were you two close in your almost 10-year relationship, I would say?
Yes.
Did you celebrate special occasions together?
Yes.
Birthdays, things like that?
Yes.
Did you ever travel together?
Yes.
How often would you say you saw each other over the course of your friendship?
Mostly monthly,
Okay.
if I had to guess.
What about in the year leading up to her passing? How often would you say you saw each other that year?
Mostly monthly until that month, definitely.
Despite seeing each other monthly, would you say you communicated pretty regularly?
Yes.
Was that through phone calls or text messages?
Yes.
In the time that you've known Amie, did you ever see her smoke any tobacco products,
No.
ingest any sort of nicotine products like vaping?
No.
Now, I want to turn your attention to February 10th of 2020. Did you see Amie that day?
Yes.
And where did you guys see each other?
We went to her home and we went on a walk or hike around her home, and then we went to dinner nearby.
Now, did you go to dinner or do a walk first?
We first did the walk.
Now, what did you do on this walk?
We caught up, just like friends would, talked about things that were going on in our lives.
How long would you say that walk lasted prior to going to dinner together?
Probably 2 hours at least.
And how long was dinner?
It seemed to be long.
Now, during your time together on February 10th, did you and Amie speak about something called the X-Biz Awards?
Yes.
Had you not talked about the X-Biz Awards prior to your meeting on February 10th?
She had mentioned that she had ran in to her ex at that award show. But it had occurred, right before.
Now, did she talk to you about the X-Biz Awards during your walk?
I don't recall it so much during the walk as I do during dinner.
So during dinner, you guys talked about the X-Biz Awards?
Yes.
What did she talk about took place at the X-Biz Awards?
She told me how she had ran into her ex, a very old ex of hers, and that he kind of went a little crazy and was triggered when he saw her and got into fetal position on the ground and was crying and reciting texts that they had had from a long time before.
When she was talking to you about this interaction with an ex-boyfriend, she indicated to you that he was crying?
Yes.
You used the word he'd gone crazy. Did she say those words to you?
I don't recall her exact wording of it at this moment.
But it was something to that effect?
That's what was expressed to me.
She talked to you about him getting into, did you say a fetal position?
Yes.
Did she at any point talk to you about the tone of his voice when she had her interaction with him?
I don't know about the tone of his voice, except for that when she was expressing it to me, it seemed just kind of chaotic. That's just how I imagined it.
What was her demeanor like when she was talking to you about this interaction with her ex at the X-Biz Awards?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Sure. What was Amy's demeanor when she was talking to you about her interaction with her ex-boyfriend at the X-Biz Awards?
She's very articulate, very well-spoken, very intelligent, and obviously she has a lot of knowledge in the mental health world.
But did she appear upset?
She seemed very stressed by it to me.
Did she express to you how that interaction with her ex-boyfriend at that award show made her feel?
She was scared. I know she was scared.
And how do you know that she was scared?
She'd spoken about things that he had previously done to her.
And without going into specifics, Ms. Rollins, I'm sorry, Your Honor.
Motion to strike. Go ahead.
Now, without going into specifics about the past, did she express to you why she was or how she was scared?
She was scared of what he might do to her, to harm her, or even her clients.
Objection, speculation, non-responsive.
Well, clear that up first of all before I rule on that.
I'm sorry?
Clear that up first of all before I rule on it. I mean,
Sure.
is that
Absolutely.
something she told you or? Good.
Sure. Did Amie tell you that she was scared?
Yes.
You said something to the effect of she was afraid that he would harm her or her clients. Did she express that to you specifically?
Yes.
All right.
Now, when she told you that she feared harm to herself, did she indicate that she was scared of her personal safety?
Objection, leading.
Same.
In light of the 402 ruling, Your Honor, I was
Trying to pinpoint.
correct.
All right. Why don't you try to re-ask it?
Sure. Did she indicate any sort of concern about her personal safety?
Yes.
And did she talk about any sort of measures she may take as a result of her fear for her personal safety?
I don't recall any measures that she said she would take at that point. But she did tell me about previous measures that she had tried to take.
Now, did you see each other again after having dinner and going on that walk on February 10th?
Yes.
And when did you see each other again?
Shortly after, on Valentine's Day.
Did you have plans with Amie?
Yes, she arranged plans for us to celebrate a Galentine's that evening.
And what did you guys decide to do?
We went to a burlesque show hosted and produced by one of her friends.
Where was that burlesque show?
That was at the Globe Theater in Los Angeles.
And do you know about what time you arrived at the Globe Theater?
I can't recall off of the top of my head right now.
Okay. Would 8 p.m. sound about right?
Yes.
And who else did you meet with at the Globe Theater?
It was Amie and her friend Rebecca.
Had you met Rebecca prior to that day?
That was my first time meeting her.
Were they already there when you arrived?
Yes,
Did you take any pictures while you were at the Globe Theater?
we did.
You know what? I'm going to show you a photograph that was previously marked. As People's 12A. Do you recognize this photograph, Ms. Jones?
Yes.
Could you please identify who's in the photograph?
Amy's on the left in the light pink dress and the leather jacket. I'm sorry.
It's okay. Take your time. Just put your hand over the
I know her as Miss Tosh, to the right of Amie, who is a producer for the event. And that's me with dark hair. And then to the right of me is Rebecca, who I had met that night.
And so the record reflects you were identifying individuals from the photograph as I was pointing to them with my finger. Is that correct?
Yes.
And this is a photograph that you had taken at the Globe Theater when you met with Amie, and company.
Yes, that's a photo that we took together.
Now, did you guys have any plans about your outfits for the evening?
We didn't discuss anything, but it was Valentine's Day. So
Now, do you recall any accessories that Amie was wearing that evening?
it looks like she has maybe 2 rosaries on.
I'm zooming into the photograph of 12A and I'm pointing to some necklaces that Amie is wearing. Are those necklaces that you recall her wearing on that day, those 2 rosaries?
I didn't notice them that evening, but I can see that she's wearing them.
Now, do you recall about what time you left the Globe Theater after the burlesque show?
I don't recall at this exact moment.
It was 9:15ish, sound about right?
Yes,
Did you go anywhere else after the burlesque show?
we did.
And where did you guys go?
We went to Rebecca's place of work nearby, and then we also went to the Nomad Hotel to have dinner, or appetizers, I guess.
And while you were at the Nomad, did you take any photos there?
We did.
Now, at this time, Your Honor, the people are holding a photograph depicting Amie Harwick and the witness date Avenue Marcus Peoples 52. I'm showing you what's been marked as Peoples 52. Do you recognize that photograph?
I do.
Can you identify who's in the photograph?
Amie on the left, and myself on the right.
And this is a photograph that you took with Amie while at the Nomad that evening?
We took it together, yes.
Now, following your appetizers and hanging out at the Nomad, do you know about what time you left?
I'm sorry, I don't recall the exact time right now.
Now, do you know about, let's say, around midnight? Does that sound about right?
I think so.
Do you know where you went after the Nomad?
I went to my cousin's house in Echo Park. That's where I had left my car, and then I had Ubered to the Globe, so I went to go pick up my car from my cousin's house.
So from the Nomad Theater, you took an Uber to Echo Park,
Yes.
where your car was parked,
Yes.
and then you drove home.
Yes.
About how long would you say it took you to get from Echo Park to your house?
I don't recall right now. Probably 35 to 45 minutes.
Okay.
But once I was driving in my car.
Did you and Amie communicate in any way after you parted ways at the Nomad?
No.
Did you receive any communication from her that evening?
Yeah, I checked my phone and I had one text message from Amie. That was once I got home, so 45 minutes later when it was received or so.
This time I'm holding 2 pages of text messages made out the marked collectively as People's 53A and B.
Yes.
I'm showing you what's been marked as 53A. You recognize these series of text messages?
I do.
And how do you recognize these text messages?
The blue ones, or all of the ones with the timestamp, are coming from my phone. I'm texting Amie. I have 80 unread texts, and she sent me a message at 1:02 a.m. asking or telling me, send me the pics on the green couch.
So let me just break it down a little bit here. You talked about a text message in blue that I'm pointing to with my pen. Is that a text message that you sent to Amie?
Yes.
Now, there are text messages that have white writing with no kind of a blackish background. Are those text messages from Amie to you?
Yes.
I'm pointing to one text message where it says, send me the pics on the green couch. Marked at 1:02 a.m. Is that a text message that you received on February 15th after your Valentine's Day gathering at the Nomad from Amie?
Yes.
And I'm pointing to a photograph that we looked at earlier. Is this your response to Amie?
Yes.
And what time did you respond to her text message?
I started sending her photos at 2:05 a.m.
Now I'm showing you what's been marked as people's 53B, which appears to be just a zoomed in version of those text messages. Is that correct?
Yes.
So again, you receive a text message from Amie at 1:02 and you respond with a photograph at 2:05.
Yes.
When was the last time you spoke to Amie?
Verbally?
Yes. Or in any way, in any form.
Oh, it seems like at 1:02 a.m. was the last time she contacted me.
So is this the last communication that you received from Amie? Was at 1:02 a.m. on February 15th?
Yes.
Thank you, nothing further.
Cross-examination.
Thank you. Good morning, Ms. Rollins.
Good morning.
Detectives interviewed you on February 16th, 2020. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And Robert Koshland was present with you during the interview.
He was.
And during that interview, both you and Mr. Koshland asked the detectives whether they had gotten the security camera footage from Ms. Harwick's house. You remember that?
I think so.
And Mr. Koshland specifically said to do it fast.
I don't remember that part.
You testified on direct that you and Miss Harwick went on a at least 2-hour walk on February 10th, 2020.
Yes.
Was that just a walk around the neighborhood near her house or on Beechwood Canyon?
It was around a lake that was by her house. I don't remember what it's called, but I have photos from that as well.
The Hollywood Reservoir, right?
I believe so.
It has like a dam on one side, and you can see the Hollywood sign in the hills.
I believe so.
So Miss Harwick was an athletic person, right?
She was physically fit.
She went on runs.
I don't know what her routine was.
She had a background in dance.
Yes.
And, like you said, she was physically fit. She worked out and stayed in good shape.
She appeared to be in good shape.
How many times had you been to her house at 2086 Mount Street, do you think?
Was that her last address where she was living?
Yes.
Probably only a handful of times.
Had you been out to the balcony that was next to her bedroom?
When she gave me a tour, yes.
I have in my hand what I'd like to be marked as defense next in order.
Double M.
Sorry, M?
Double M, yes.
Okay.
Is that a photo?
Yes. It's what appears to be a photo of Miss Harwick. May I approach?
Yes.
Ms. Rollins, is this a picture of Miss Harwick on the railing on her balcony?
Objection, foundation.
Is that a picture of your objection to what foundation, in terms of the railing?
This is the date of the photograph and whether she has personal knowledge of some of that photo is taken.
Wow, did you assign a date to it?
No,
No, I didn't think you did.
you may answer.
I don't know what the railing looked like exactly.
Does this look like a picture of Miss Harwick on her balcony?
It's definitely a photo of Amie on some sort of fence.
Okay. And you'd been out to the balcony, you said, when she gave you a tour,
Yes.
but you're not sure whether this is a photo of her on the balcony.
I don't know.
Now, at the time of the interview with detectives on the 16th of February, you indicated that Mr. Caution was there the whole time, right?
Right.
And while you were doing this interview with the detectives, there were people gathering at Mr. Caution's house.
Is that a question?
Yes.
What was the question?
Isn't it true that there were people gathering at Mr. Caution's house while you were having the interview with detectives?
I believe he does say that in our interview. Yes.
Do you have a recollection that people were gathering at Mr. Caution's house at the time that you were having this interview with detectives?
Objection, speculation.
Did you, no, he asked, do you have any recollection of people, independent recollection, while you were being interviewed, that people were gathering at the house?
I understand your question. I don't completely remember.
Okay. Would it refresh your recollection to look at a transcript of the interview?
Yes.
If I may just have one brief moment. Actually, I'll move on. One of the reasons, so at the time of the interview, you and Mr. Caution were receiving lots of messages about Miss Harwick's passing, right?
I believe that he mentions that there were he was receiving messages.
Were you receiving messages about Miss Harwick's death?
Not that I recall.
Were you and Mr. Caution concerned about how her story would be told in the media?
I'm not sure.
Do you recall telling the detectives that you hoped that her story would be able to be controlled?
I don't recall saying that.
Would it refresh your recollection to look at a transcript of the interview?
Yes.
All right, this is page 12 of the second transcript, transcript number 2. So if you could please read from line 19 to 28 of page 12 of transcript.
Read it to yourself if you want to.
Yeah, read it to yourself, not aloud.
I'm sorry, I wasn't done. I'm
Did that refresh
finished.
your recollection?
A bit.
And isn't it true that during the interview with detectives, you expressed that that you had concerns about how her story would be told by the media?
What I just read, none of that was coming from me. I think my abbreviation is the letter S.
Would it refresh your recollection to look at the key on the transcript?
Yes.
May I approach?
Yes.
Showing the cover page of the transcript, 2 of 2.
Oh, thank you.
So if you could just look right there at the legend and then look up when you're done.
Okay.
And do you want to look back at page 12 again?
Yes.
Okay. So if you could please reread lines 19 to 28.
Okay. Yes.
And have you reread them?
I understand. Yes.
Okay. So isn't it true that you expressed concern to the detectives about how the media would tell her story?
Yes.
And that you expressed a desire that you hoped it would be able to be controlled?
I hope that she's portrayed as the woman that she is, and not a victim who was naive. And, that's what I meant by that.
Okay. Objection as to narrative at this point. Sorry, one moment. Prior to your testimony today, did you speak with Mr. Avila or Ms. Mariano about your testimony today? Recent to today.
Catherine, is that your last name?
Yes.
Yes.
And did you speak about the facts of the case?
I went over my interview with the detectives via audio and transcript, and then also the preliminary trial transcript only.
My question was whether you spoke with Ms. Mariano about the facts of this case.
I asked her what Mr. Pursehouse could be facing.
That was the only discussion about the facts of this case. Is that your testimony?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, nothing further.
One moment. No redirect or anything.
Ma'am, you may step down. Thank you. Make all your notes with her.
The people at this side call Mr. Patrick Turner.
What's the last name?
Turner.
Fine. All right.
Gareth, we have about just a couple of minutes for the witness to get into the courtroom.
Yes. How long is it going to be? I just don't want the jury sitting there.
We ran to the restroom for a moment.
Oh, yeah. Okay. She's coming. All right. What page is he on your list?
I'm sorry, Gareth?
What page is he on your list? Is he on it? He's not on the list?
This is a late edition.
Oh, it is. Okay. Is it Officer Turner or how do you refer to yourself?
Just Patrick Turner.
Okay, Mr. Turner, if you would face my question.
You solemnly state that the testimony you're about to give and the cause now pending before this court should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes.
Thank you. Please have a seat. Please state and spell both your first and last name.
Patrick Turner, PatrickTurner.
Thank you, Your Honor. What do you do for a living?
I am an engineer with the LA City Fire Department.
What is an engineer?
I drive the fire engine to and from incidents, mitigate fire and emergency responses, medical responses. Yeah.
Do you have any other training?
I am also trained as a EMT and as a paramedic.
Now, what were you assigned to as, or what was your occupation specifically back on February 15th of 2020?
I was also an engineer at Fire Station 82.
Now, on February 15th at around 1:40 in the morning, were you at the location of 2086 Mound Street in the city and county of Los Angeles?
Yes.
Why were you at that location on that date and time?
We were called out as an engine company, and we responded to that incident. I don't remember the name of the type of call it was, but we were dispatched.
And was that at around 1:32 in the morning?
Yes.
Do you recall what time you actually arrived?
I believe we arrived within 5 to 10 minutes.
Do you recall if there was any sort of delay in getting to that location?
I do remember that it was a unique street. I don't believe I'd ever driven down that street before. It was on the west side of our district, so it was fairly far away as it's, we encompass the Hollywood Hills for our district. So I do remember it was on the west side and it was down a street that I hadn't really even been on before.
Was it a narrow street?
It was a narrow street and it was like up a hill as well.
So I know you said as an engineer you drive a fire truck. Was it hard to navigate up to that residence?
Yes, that's the thing.
Now, would you say that the location of where you or 2086 Mount Street caused any sort of delay in arriving to the location?
Maybe it may have hindered us by a couple of minutes, perhaps, because I believe I had to park the apparatus a little bit further away than I normally would have, and then we had to walk up to the house.
Who else were you with during that time?
I was with a captain and 2 firefighters along, inside the engine with me, and then there was LAPD on scene.
Were any of the other fire department personnel an EMT?
They are all EMTs.
Were any of them paramedics?
No.
Now, can you describe what you observed once you arrived on scene?
Once we arrived on scene, I remember walking up to the house, just thinking it seemed like a unique looking house. It was large. It was dark. It was late at night, early in the morning. LAPD's there walking us through. And it took us a while to get from the front, and they were escorting us to the backyard where they were explaining a little bit what we were walking into.
And when you say they were explaining, are you talking about law enforcement explaining?
Yeah, it just LAPD was, they were the ones that greeted us, and they took us basically to where the victim was laying in the backyard.
When you say they were explaining something to you, is that something that customarily happens when you report to a scene?
Yeah, absolutely.
You can answer.
Yeah, we arrived on scene. It's typical if whoever's calling us out, whether it's just a public person or if, in this case it was LAPD, we kind of just give us a little rundown of what we're expecting. We have if it's a patient or if they have a person in custody, they'll just let us know, okay, this is kind of what happened. This is what we're seeing, and we're going to lead you to where we need you to do your assessment.
You said that you were led to the backyard. What did you observe once you actually got into the backyard?
We walked through this down these stairs, I believe, to the backyard, and when we went outside, we were shown where the victim was laying, and then there we saw her laying on the ground.
When you say you saw the victim, what was her state at the time you observed her in the backyard?
Just upon seeing her from a distance, I initially thought she was a dead victim. The LAPD had told us that it was a fall from the balcony about 2 to 3 stories in height. So I remember looking up, okay, seeing the balcony, that it was quite high, and that she had fallen from the balcony onto the concrete, and looking and appearing lifeless at the time upon my immediate just assessment, just from seeing her.
Did you take a closer look at her once beyond just your initial glance?
Yes, of course. We proceeded to, we walked through, we all entered the backyard. We had our equipment with us, and then we went to go ahead and assess the status of the patient lying on the ground.
Now, I know you said that you're an engineer by occupation. Why is it that you were hands-on with the victim, seeing that your primary duty is to drive the fire truck?
Exactly. Well, that's just one of my duties. If there is any instance where there is critical patient care that's involved, I'm always going to jump in and also lend a hand. And in this circumstance, this is definitely a critical patient, so I felt the need to assist as much as I could.
Your Honor, at this time, the people have a DVD of body-worn video made at the mark as B4, and there's an accompanying transcript made at the mark as 54B.
Yes, what's the duration of this?
About 20 minutes, if I'm not mistaken, Your Honor. 20 to 30.
She said V should be A.
I'm sorry, should I reverse it?
This is DVD and transcript. So mark the transcript A. Right? No.
Permission to distribute the transcript, Your Honor?
You have a copy of the court? DVD.
Your Honor, may we approach?
all breaks should be cut out. I hope you can hear me. Since this is the day before, I don't know why. Thanks for being here, guys. Please hit that thumbs up button for me.
I'm stopping the video at 10 minutes and 53 seconds. Can you let us know all of the LA Fire Department's personnel that walked in at that point?
Yes, so the person in the very front was the captain for our engine company, Captain Dave Grijalva. I believe I was the second one to follow through. And then the two firefighters behind me were firefighter Majak and firefighter Brinson.
Continuing the recording at 10 minutes and 53 seconds. I'm pausing the video at 11 minutes and 10 seconds. Based on this, where I stopped the video, can you point out the personnel that you just named?
Yes, so the gentleman holding the flashlight, that's Captain Grijalva. He's also in charge of our radio comms, so he's the one talking on the radio right now to dispatch. This is firefighter Majak.
And on the bottom left corner, is that the victim as you observed her when you first walked in?
Right here, yes, this is the victim right here, how we observed her as we came in. I can't really see from this where I'm standing or where firefighter Brinson is.
Can you all see, ladies and gentlemen? Okay, you have a pointer there, if you need a wooden pointer or something. Behind you. Below the screen, Megan.
Everyone's talking.
Right, the pointer.
Behind your seat?
Yeah.
Oh,
You're looking for a laser.
I was looking for a laser.
Resuming the video at 11 minutes and 10 seconds.
He said he heard her screaming.
I'm stopping the video at 11 minutes and 32 seconds. I think I stopped it a little late, but there was someone, fire department personnel standing over the body, touching it. Could you tell us what that person is doing?
That person is checking for a pulse.
Oh, page 12. Resuming the video at 11 minutes and 32 seconds.
Hey, so what we got right now is a female. It looks like she either fell, jumped, or was thrown from a third-story balcony. The roommate that's here says he heard her screaming. He thought she was probably being attacked. But instead of going to check on her, he went out to the street and was claiming. And I called police, and then he found her with the officers. There's some blood on his shirt, though. He says he didn't know, doesn't think anyone else was here. So it looks, she's breathing right now, but she looks pretty bad. Mound.
I'm pausing at 12 minutes and 26 seconds. In the figure to the left, it's a little harder on the TV screen. Crouched over the victim's body. Who is that?
I am crouched over the victim's body right now.
And what are you doing at that point?
I'm verifying that there actually is a pulse right now.
And was there a pulse at the time that you checked the victim?
There was a pulse.
Continuing the video at 12 minutes and 26 seconds.
Okay, we're gonna do it. Yeah, she doesn't look too great. The balcony would be 2 full stories, 2.5. So like 20 feet, 25 feet. All right, ready.
I'm stopping the video at 12 minutes and 36 seconds. Faintly, we hear someone say, "Man, talk to me." What is it that you or one of the other fire department personnel is doing?
So right now I'm just trying to determine her level of consciousness. She was laying face down. We checked her pulse. I personally checked her pulse. She had a very, very weak and thready pulse. And very, very slow agonal respirations from my initial assessment. I'm now checking to see if I can wake her up, if she's going to respond to me either verbally, open her eyes, start talking to me. That's what I'm trying to determine right now. So by me saying, "Ma'am, can you hear me?" I'm trying to stimulate any of her senses to see if I can get any response from her.
You said that you checked for her pulse and that it was thready. Is that a bad indication?
Yes, that's very, very bad.
You talked about checking her respirations. Is that correct?
Correct.
And how was that?
So she wasn't breathing normally. She was having irregular gasps, not normal exchange of normal tidal volume of breathing in and out. And that, along with her weak and slow pulse, are just signs that she is a very, very critical patient.
Did she respond to you when you were speaking to her, saying, "Ma'am, talk to me"?
No.
Is that also a sign of her critical state at that time?
Correct.
Continuing the video at 13 minutes and 26 seconds.
Hey, what's the number, city? What was that? 2086.
pausing at 13 minutes and 53 seconds. You're crouched next to the victim, is that correct?
That is correct.
What are you doing at this point?
So right now we have moved the patient from a prone position. She was lying on her stomach. We've turned her over, and we are now just going to start establishing some patient care. So right now we are with a fall for this height, and for a patient to be unconscious, we have to assume massive head injury. The potential for various broken bones, we have to consider all these things. So we have carefully turned her over with protection of her head and neck in mind, and we are going to just start conducting our full assessment of her, along with the treatment, including securing her neck with a C-collar, removing her clothes, and checking for further injuries, and providing first aid and vital signs, everything that we can do for her prior to the ambulance arriving.
Why did you have to flip her from from prone position to being upright?
Because a natural position to assess a patient is not while they're laying on the ground with their face down and their stomach down. We have to put her in a position to open her airway if her airway was potentially closed, put her head and neck in an upright position so we can give her every chance to move air cleanly. And that requires her to be on her back, not on her stomach.
What do you do once she's on her back?
So once we turn her over and she's on her back, we keep in mind, we try to keep her head in line with the rest of her body. We raise her chin slightly so she has a good patent airway. And then we can just start conducting a rapid physical assessment from head to toe, and then initiate any care that we deem needed.
How do you do a rapid physical assessment?
So initially, for any trauma patient, we try to just do a brief, quick head to toe, looking at what the biggest things are. The biggest, by meaning like the most critical things that we can do. For someone who's unconscious, who has fallen from a 2-3 story balcony, and in this particular case, she wasn't breathing adequately. She's not perfusing adequately, meaning her heart rate is very, very low. So we know that she's critical. She's not pushing enough blood through her organs. She's not breathing enough. She's not oxygenating her brain enough. So we're quickly going through, and we need to try to fix that as much as we can. And then while we're doing that, we need to also assess for other damage that we can report to the paramedic ambulance when they arrive on scene, such as broken bones, other injuries that we notice. We just don't want to miss anything.
Proceeding the video at 13:53. I'm stopping at 15:07. There's an individual directly in the middle of the screen messing with what looks to be a device. What is he doing?
Correct. That is the captain right now, and he's opening up a oxygen cylinder, and he is turning the regulator on. That's the noise that you hear, that he's turning it, making sure that there's oxygen that's going to flow out of that. And he is, out of the bag, he is obtaining an adult bag valve mask, which is a device that is used when connected to the oxygen cylinder, will allow oxygen flow, continuous oxygen flow to a setting of our choice, and also comes with a tube that we can squeeze and actually breathe for the patient. It inflates their lungs at any given rate that we decide to depress it.
At this time, did you make a determination that the victim needed assistance breathing?
100%. She was not breathing adequately on her own.
Resuming the video at 15 minutes and 7 seconds.
If they go around the side of the house here too, it's a straight shot.
I'm stopping the video at 16, 17. It appears that you do a motion with both of your hands along the victim's entire body. What is it that you're doing?
So what we've done here is with any trauma victim, we remove their clothes. So I think she did have a nightgown or something on. So that I've cut off and removed, and I've also taken off her boots. I think she had some higher boots on as well. But for any trauma victim, it's important that we get eyes on their entire body, head to toe, with the exception of underwear, bras, that sort of thing, just so we can make sure that we don't miss anything. We want to make sure that we catch any injury that they may have sustained. So by me palpating her body, I'm just running through and I'm just assessing for broken bones, any like lacerations, punctures, any other sort of wounds that she may have received. And I'm just trying to do that very, very quickly so I can assess how bad she may be injured.
And did that sort of pat down of the victim's body reveal any sort of injuries?
Yes, it did.
And what sort of injuries were you able to glean from doing that?
So initially, you can even see that there was a pool of blood, which was coming from her nose and mouth area. That was pretty obvious just from seeing that. But once we removed the clothes and had her turned around, after assessing it, I did notice that she did have extensive deformity to her pelvic region, so her hips, waistline, all the way up to her neck. She had some disfigurement to her neck and collarbone area, and she had extreme softness and tenderness to her ribs and stomach region. Ribs meaning like it was being soft around that area, just indicative of possible broken ribs. And coming from a fall onto the pavement, right, that would be in line with what to be expected from a fall like that.
After cutting off the victim's clothes and doing that assessment, did you continue to believe that she was in a critical state?
100%.
Continuing the video at 16 minutes and 17 seconds.
That was the first, so that's why I asked. What I don't like about the stories he said he had touch, right? I understand the likelihood that he could have come through the back door, right? He could have opened everything for you guys to do. Well, that's what Sarah says. Heard wrestling or the way. Yeah, the third story, yeah. They're going on to a couple others to see if they heard or see anything. No, just they saw one. Once everyone's gets through someone, you should ride for this. Yeah, I'll get one that result. Hey. Yeah. Case of any kind of sales. Yeah. Ride with her. Well, we'll get you. You guys are gonna go to Cedars, I'm sure. Yeah.
I'm stopping the video at 20 minutes and 37 seconds. There's some chatter about going to Cedars Hospital. Is that where the victim is headed to?
Yes, based on the criteria of this injury, it's important that this victim goes to a trauma center. The only two trauma centers in this area would be County USC and Cedars. And based on the location of the residence, she would be qualifying to go to Cedars.
And at this point, what are you waiting for?
So right now we're just waiting for the ambulance to arrive.
And why did an ambulance need to arrive?
Because she's extremely critical. We weren't dispatched with the paramedic ambulance to begin with. So we're pretty much just waiting for them to get there. We've taken over her breathing for her, and we're just kind of setting everything up so when the paramedics arrive, we can just load her on the gurney immediately, and then they can get going to the hospital.
Proceeding the video at 20 minutes and 37 seconds.
a skirt. And yeah, if they go on the side of the house here, there's no stairs or anything. It's easier for those. It's more like a ramp. It's not a. Born in 81, so 39. Very faint. Very, very faint.
Stopping to be at 24 minutes and 46 seconds. Who just arrived into the residence?
The Rescue 82, the ambulance, has just arrived.
stopping the video at 26 minutes and 2 seconds. We hear, I believe it is you that says she has a blood pressure of like 60. Was that you?
Correct, that was me.
And what does that indicate to you?
So I'm basically just giving them a rundown of our findings right now. And, a blood pressure of 60 is just not sustainable for life. I've let them know that upon my assessment, I said that she's really soft all around here, meaning that she had softness to all of her entire thoracic region where it shouldn't be soft. It should be rigid with bones. She was soft. And along with, breathing for her and the pulse and blood pressure, just relaying all the information we found to them.
And what are you and the 2 paramedics doing at this point?
So now what we're doing is we're securing her to a backboard so we can move her. We don't want to just lift someone up off the ground just with all of us putting our hands on them because we don't know the full extent to all of her injuries. So for maneuverability, we place that red backboard underneath her so we can all lift her. And then we're going to place her on the gurney, and then we will secure her to the gurney.
Resuming the video at 26 minutes and 2 seconds.
Emergency one additional unit at 2086 Mount Street.
Yeah, probably. Quite possibly. Very weak, almost non-existent pulse. Quite possibly. Yeah. Okay, they're gonna take her to Cedars. I got an officer riding with her just in case she does come to and have anything to say. We got, probably fell from this balcony, but we got a loaded heroin rig up there. Roommate thinks there was someone here with her.
Now, Mr. Turner, at the end of that video, we see her being rolled away on a gurney outside of the backyard. What 2 paramedics was she accompanied by?
She was accompanied by paramedic Dane Lindstrom and paramedic Austin Smith.
From the moment you arrived at the residence to the moment that paramedics took her out of the residence on a gurney, did her critical state change at any time?
No, it did not change.
Was there any sort of improvement, in your opinion, based upon your treatment or assessment of her from the moment you first observed the victim to the time that she was taken away on a gurney?
No, she was fighting for her life.
Thank you. Nothing further. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Fireman Turner.
Good afternoon.
Thank you very much for your service. When you treated Amie Harwick, the person depicted in the videos, did you ever find that she lost pulse, a palpable pulse?
No, I don't believe she had lost her pulse completely.
If she had lost her pulse, would you have had to administer CPR?
Correct.
And you did not administer CPR.
That is correct.
Now, your unit was the first to arrive. That was an engine vehicle, correct?
Correct.
And you said on direct examination that an ambulance was not dispatched along with your engine. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Do you know why that was?
I have no idea. I believe I don't know what was said to whoever called 911 or what went down with the dispatch. So I don't know why one was not with us initially.
Based on your assessment of Amie Harwick when you observed her, was it your opinion she needed a rescue ambulance immediately?
She did.
Now, you were the person who was responsible for removing her outer clothing?
I removed her outer clothing.
Yes. So you cut off whatever that pink garment was that she was wearing?
I did.
And also some boots?
Correct.
And do you recall those boots? They were knee-high boots?
Yes.
And that was in order for you to be able to observe her body in a way that permitted you to do a full assessment of her condition?
Yes.
And did you also remove any jewelry from her?
I don't believe I removed any jewelry.
Okay. And you did not apply the C-collar yourself?
I don't remember if I actually put the C-collar on her neck. I don't know if it was me that actually did it or if it was one of the firefighters.
Okay. And do you recall anybody removing any jewelry from around her neck before applying the C-collar?
No, I don't remember anything about the jewelry.
When she was, so you didn't actually transport her to Cedars?
Me personally, no.
So your involvement with her care ended at the point where the rescue ambulance arrived and carted her to the rescue ambulance for transport to Cedars?
That is correct.
It appears in watching this video that there is a very deliberate and kind of methodical approach to how each of the paramedics and EMTs that responded approached Amie Harwick and began their assessment. Would you agree with that?
Would you repeat that again?
Well, I don't see a sense of urgency in the way everybody's approaching her. So I'm asking if that like a deliberate, intentional approach to take it very slow and assess her before moving her in order not to cause further injury, and because it appeared she needed to be evaluated more seriously rather than immediately just dive in and start administering aid.
I mean, we arrived and we still have to we have to gain our bearings on what's happening right now. So it may appear to look like it's a long time for you, but right now there's a bunch of things going through our heads. You know, we have to assess, you know, we have to piece together this puzzle and figure out kind of what happened and then initiate care. She looked unresponsive and dead just by looking at her from the doorway. As we step closer, it's dark outside. As we step closer, we see, okay, wait, there are some forms of life. She is like faintly breathing. And then we can't just move her over. We have to carefully move her. We have to set up the oxygen tank. We have to open up bags of equipment, and we have to connect them to the oxygen and prep them. We have to take care of our own body substance isolation. So there's just a number of steps that need to happen before we can just sort of dive in and just start running around.
Okay. And so part of that was PPE you were talking about, personal protective equipment also is necessary when you are approaching a person who's in distress and in need of medical care.
Yeah.
So all of these things were were part of your deliberative effort to assess her and determine what care she was in need of at that time.
Correct.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Maybe Greg.
Just briefly, do you think you were moving with a lack of urgency at this situation?
No, I don't think we moved with a lack of urgency. In fact, it was very urgent, but there's also just a limited amount that we can do.
Do you believe that you were acting appropriately as the situation called for? In other words, treating the victim who was in a critical state at the moment?
Yes, absolutely. Once we determined that she had a pulse and that she did have agonal respirations, we got the oxygen and started breathing for her.
Thank you, nothing further.
Anything based on those?
No.
All right, thank you. You may step down.
Thank you.
All right. Make card, National Williams.
The people call Mr. Dane Lindstrom.
All right, if you could step to the witness stand, raise your right hand.
You solemnly state that the testimony you're about to give and the cause now pending before this court should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. Please have a seat. Please state and spell both your first and last name.
Dane Lindstrom, DaneLindstrom.
All right, counsel.
Thank you. What do you do for a living?
I'm a firefighter paramedic with the Los Angeles Fire Department.
And was that your assignment back on February 15th of 2020?
Yes.
What are your duties as a paramedic?
We respond to EMS emergencies to treat citizens and travelers through the city of LA.
And what's your background, training, and experience that qualifies you to be a paramedic?
I have a license. I'm certified as an EMT and licensed through the state and nation as a paramedic, as an EMT paramedic.
Now, on February 15th of 2020 at around 1:54 in the morning, were you at the location of 2086 Mountain Street in the city and county of Los Angeles?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. Now, why were you there on that date and time?
We were called to respond to a fall.
Now, when you received that call, did you immediately report to the scene?
Yes, we did. We were upgraded by an engine, but we were told it was up in the Hollywood Hills, so we had to back our ambulance in. So there was a little bit of delay getting to the scene. But yes, we went from the station to the scene.
And what do you mean by you were upgraded from an engine? What does that mean?
So the initial dispatch was an engine only, and I was on the ambulance that day. So an engine arrives there first on scene, and they make an assessment of what they need, whether it's an EMT ambulance or a paramedic ambulance. They felt the need for paramedics to arrive on scene, and so they radioed our dispatch to add one, and that was us.
And did you report to this scene alone or with somebody else?
With a partner.
And who was your partner at the time?
Austin Smith.
Now, can you describe what you observed when you arrived on scene?
All right, let's sit counsel.
Sure.
All right, counsel.
Thank you. When you arrived on scene, did you transport somebody by ambulance?
Yeah.
And when you transport that person by ambulance, where did you transport that person to?
To reconfirm, I need to check my report, but I'm pretty sure Cedars-Sinai Medical Center.
Okay. And when you,
You want to check your report?
Can it be thrown up in front of me just so I don't say something out of
no, I mean,
It's Cedars-Sinai, but
All right.
if we're going to go deeper into questions.
No.
Okay. Now, was your observation of the victim at the time you transported her, was she critical?
Yes.
Now, did you conduct an assessment of that person while in the ambulance?
Yes.
Now, you said there was somebody else with you. What was your partner doing at the time?
Exactly. So both of us would have been working on the patient if she was a critical patient.
And the reason why both of you were working on her is because she was critical?
Yes.
Can you talk about the assessment or your assessment of her condition while in the ambulance during transport?
They're critical, but I mean, do you mean something more specific?
Yes.
Okay. Are you able to differentiate between critical and something else?
Sure. So it was a fall victim. So we would do what's called a trauma assessment. So I mean, we're going to do a head to toe assessment to see any breaks, bleeding. The big things are to take care of the ABCs: airway, breathing, and circulation. If she's not breathing, then we're going to check what's broken, what's injured, and go for a full head to toe to give the a report to the hospital to kind of transfer care and what we can treat in the field. If that.
Would you say your assessment in the back of an ambulance is more thorough than that of an assessment that would be done at an actual crime scene?
Objection, Your Honor, calls for speculation.
Do you know how to answer that? Can you answer that?
So we are going to assess and reassess. So when we find somebody on scene, we're going to get an initial assessment. But always, once we get them back in the back of the ambulance, we're going to give a reassessment to see if we missed anything, if it's dark, if we didn't roll the patient, if they woke up, if something changed.
Did she wake up at any point?
No.
Was she unconscious the entirety of the transport from the location to Cedars-Sinai?
Yes.
And based on your head to toe assessment, were there any injuries that you observed on the decedent? I'm sorry, not the decedent, the victim?
Yes. Can I refer to my report to list them?
Well, I think that they've already been described.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
And so based on her injuries, did you observe that she had broken bones, for instance?
Objection, Your Honor, I think that is beyond the ability to assess probably.
Well,
There is suspicion, but
I'm not sure that it is. I'll find out. Are you able to tell whether someone's bone is broken, a particular bone or what have you, just by feeling the body or what have you?
We can suspect broken bones if there's nothing popping out of the skin, but yes, we're looking for crepitus, which is grinding or popping. So we're pushing hard on bones to see if they're going to rebound or crunch or squish, I guess you could say, for lack of a better word.
All right.
And did you,
She had
scrunch on bones, I guess?
She had several regions of her body that were unstable, so that should not have been as. I mean, we're squishy when they should not have been.
Is that a legal term? Squishy?
Right.
No, I'm sorry. Yeah, they were unstable when they should have been stable. Would be the best.
And was this could you name a region of the body in which she was squishy, as you would call it?
Yeah, I believe her. I mean, once again with the report, her pelvis and her rib cage were unstable.
Gotcha. Okay. Now, you said you assessed her for her airways. I believe.
Yeah.
At any point, did her airways change, the condition of her airways, from the moment you picked her up to the moment you dropped her off?
So upon our arrival on scene, the engine was already breathing for her. So we were assisting respirations with a bag valve mask. So we continued to assist her respirations the entire time.
Now, is there any other injuries that you were able to be?
Again, I can contemplate what your question's going to be based on the sidebar conversation we had. The court's going to impose its own objection under 352.
Okay.
Move on, if you would.
That's fine, Your Honor. Did her condition remain critical at the time of drop off at Cedars-Sinai?
Yes.
Did you remain at Cedars-Sinai?
We had to linger. For me personally, I like to look in on trauma patients to see what they do, and also I have a report to fill out. I was too busy tending the patient, so I had to do all my paperwork afterwards.
But her condition did not change whatsoever.
Upon the time we found her to when we dropped her off, no.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Cross-examination.
just a couple questions.
All right.
Hi.
It's going to be so short, I'm not going to even walk over there.
Okay.
So when you were caring for this critical patient, were you the one who actually put the C-collar on?
I don't believe so, no. I think that would have been on before we got there.
Okay. And did you remove any personal items from this individual's body? Amie Harwick was her name. Did you?
So we would have cut her clothes off. That would have been, if we're considering those personal items, we're not going to take jewelry or anything unless it gets in the way of our treatments, but we would have removed her clothes.
Okay. And would necklaces be considered something that would want to be removed prior to administering a C-collar?
Probably yes. If it gets in the way, but you can also fit a C-collar over the necklace as well.
Okay. And patient also had palpable pulses the entire time she was in your care.
I believe so, yes.
And if she had lost pulses, would you have administered CPR?
Yes.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Anything?
No, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. You may sit down. Appreciate it. You may call your next witness.
We'll call Ms. Natasha Paulson.
All right.
Please raise your right hand. You solemnly state that the testimony you're about to give and the cause now pending before this court should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do so swear.
Thank you. Please have a seat. Please state and spell both your first and last name.
Natasha Paulson, Natasha Paulson.
Hi. Do you know somebody by the name of Gareth Pursehouse?
By name, yes.
And what do you mean by name?
I mean that we haven't met in person, but we've conversed through text messages and we've spoken on the phone.
And if you could do me a favor, could you move just a little closer to the mic so that we can hear
How's
you?
that?
Better.
Okay.
Thank you. So could you repeat your answer so that we can hear you?
Oh, sorry. We've communicated through actually a dating app Hinge through text messages, and we had one conversation on the phone.
Let's talk about the dating app Hinge.
Okay.
Describe how it is that you met somebody by the name of Gareth Pursehouse on this app.
So the way that Hinge works is either party can contact whoever they're seeking. It's not like Bumble to where only the woman can reach out first. With Hinge, you have the ability to leave comments on photos or any of the texts that the other person has placed in their profile. And that's sort of the way to open up the conversation. And then if you're interested, you can respond back. That's how we got started. I believe he reached out first.
Now, on this Hinge dating app, are you able to see photographs of the person that you're speaking to?
Yes.
And did you see any photographs associated with the Hinge profile belonging to someone by the name of Gareth Pursehouse?
Yes, I did.
Here at this time, the people are holding what appears to be a profile picture. The name Gareth, the that mark, that's people's 56. Do you recognize this photograph depicted in People's 56?
Yes, I do.
And how do you recognize that?
This was his Facebook profile picture and his Hinge profile picture.
And do you see the person that's depicted in this photograph in court today?
Yes, I do.
Could you please identify that person tell us where that person is seated and what that person is wearing?
He is the second person from the right in the front row here, wearing a navy blazer and what looks like a white polo with dark hair and glasses.
Now, I know you said that you met on Hinge. Did you initially start communicating through the application itself?
Yes, initially.
And did that communication turn into other forms of communication?
Yes, it did.
What forms of communication?
We exchanged phone numbers and started texting, and we had one phone call.
Now I'm going to show, you said that you communicated on the actual app itself.
Yes.
Laura, at this time I'm holding another page sitting here on the top with what it appears to be exchange messages. Did that be Marcus Peoples 57?
Yes.
I'm showing you what's been marked as Peoples 57. Do you recognize that?
Yes, I do.
And how do you recognize that?
That is a photograph of myself on the Hinge app, and that is Gareth's response to me below.
Where it says Morticia Adams with a happy face, I'll be Gomez?
Yes.
When did you start communicating on Hinge?
Oh, I believe we matched on Tuesday the 11th, and I believe, well, I know for a fact that we started texting and we had our phone call on Tuesday the 11th of 2020.
So would you say you started communicating throughout other means aside from the application immediately after meeting on Hinge?
Yes.
And that was through text messages?
Text messaging and then one phone call.
Do you have to exchange phone numbers in order to do that?
You do. It's for Hinge, I'm not sure if there's a call function through it, but we did not use that. We used our cell phones.
So you actually had to actively exchange phone numbers to do that?
Correct.
At this time, Your Honor, I'm holding another photograph of a series of text messages that marked as Peoples 58.
Yeah.
I'm showing you what's been marked as Peoples 50. Do you recognize that?
Yes, I do.
And how do you recognize that?
This was our first text exchange, and after the gotcha, I believe is when we had our first phone call.
Now I'm showing you these text messages here on the left that appear to be lighter in color. Are those text messages that you received from the defendant?
Yes, they are.
And as to the ones on the right side with a darker background, are those text messages that you sent?
Yes, they are.
And you said these are text messages that you changed on Tuesday, February 11th?
Correct.
Now at the top here, there's a phone number. Is that the phone number that was given to you by the defendant to communicate?
Yes, it is.
Now, was this phone number always labeled in your phone as such?
No, at one point I did change it to his name, but when I took these text messages to send in, I changed it back to the phone number.
Now, you said at some point you also exchanged a phone call on the same day that you initially exchanged text messages.
Correct.
Is that correct? And that was around after the time the text message you sent said, gotcha.
Correct.
Now, I also want to talk to you about further communication you had with the defendant. Did that continue past February 11th?
Yes, it did.
And that was also through text message?
Yes, it was.
I want to talk to you about Valentine's Day of 2020, February 14th.
Okay.
Did you exchange text messages with the defendant on that day?
Yes, we did.
You know, at this time, the people are holding 2 pages of a series of text messages. May that be marked as People's?
59.
Yes.
All right.
I'm showing you what's been marked as People's 59. Do you recognize this?
Yes, I do.
And how do you recognize this?
This was the part of the text message exchange that we had on Valentine's Day.
Showing you the first text message exchange here, Happy Valentine's Day. Was that received by you
Yes, it was.
from the defendant?
Correct.
And at what time?
It was at 12:02 p.m.
Now there is a text message here in blue. Hello there, apologies. It's been nonstop trying to get today's collection up in the shop so it can be purchased. How are you? Is that a text message sent by you to the defendant?
Correct.
And that was at what time?
5:55 p.m.
There's another text message Oh, that's totally fine. Busy woman. I'm good, just also trying to get everything under the sun done. Happy face. Is this a text message you received from the defendant?
Yes, it is.
And where it says, I just finished, Lordy, is that a text message to the defendant?
Yes, it is.
Turning to the second page, do you recognize these text messages?
Yes, I do.
Are these a continuation of the messages that we were just reading?
Yes, they are.
There's a text message that reads, yippee. Is that from the defendant to you?
Yes, it is.
Now there's another message here. Watching dudes pick out last minute flowers at the market is amusing. If you catch their eye, they give you a help look and some sort of laughing emoji. Is that a text message you sent to the defendant?
Yes, it is.
And at what time was that?
10:48 p.m.
Now, did you get a response from the defendant?
Not immediately, but yes, I did.
And when did you receive that response?
February 15 at 1:57 a.m.
And that response is, ha ha, that's funny.
Correct.
Is that the last communication that you received from the defendant?
That I received, yes.
Thank you, Your Honor. Nothing further.
Good afternoon, Ms. Paulson.
Good afternoon.
You reached out to the detectives on the 17th of February of 2020, right?
Correct.
And so your communication with them was initiated by you.
Yes, it was.
You suffered a head injury, right?
That is correct.
And you lost a lot of your memories from 2020.
Yes, I did.
Sorry that happened to you. When did your memory loss? Was it actually amnesia? Is that how it was?
Correct. Retrograde amnesia.
When did that, to what point did that affect your memories?
So the span of my amnesia begins near mid to late March of 2020.
After reaching out to the detectives on the 17th of February 2020, you had a phone call with a Detective Masterson on April 25th, 2020.
That is incorrect. I spoke with Detective Luis Carranza.
It was with Detective Carranza. Okay. And it was on the 25th of April, 2020, right?
I actually do not remember the day that he and I spoke, but I do remember that we spoke.
Okay. That conversation was not recorded.
Not to my knowledge.
You had a meeting on the 29th of August of this year with Miss Mariano and with Detective Carranza.
That is correct.
And then that was in person, right?
Correct.
And that was also not recorded.
Not to my knowledge.
The timestamp that, or your testimony on direct about what time the messages were sent and received, you're relying on what the phone says, right?
I'm sorry, could you clarify your question?
Earlier with your direct testimony with Miss Mariano, you were asked, what time a message was sent, what time a message was received. Your understanding of when a message was sent or received is based on what the timestamp is on your phone.
Yes, correct.
It wasn't like, you were sitting there, saw the message, looked at your watch.
No.
Okay, thank you. That's great.
Any regrets?
So Ms. Paulson, I just want to be clear, any sort of amnesia you may have suffered as a result of an accident takes place after these events, is that correct?
Over a month after. I mean, the actual amnesia itself does not start until over a month after.
And when did that accident occur?
When did the accident occur?
Yes.
It was January 27th, 2021.
So after you had met the defendant on Hinge, is that correct?
Correct.
after you had had a conversation with Detective Carranza regarding your interaction with the defendant on April 23rd, 2020.
Correct.
And so your memory loss that you suffered dates from March 2020, after this incident, to what time frame?
I would say approximately maybe February-ish. The thing with amnesia and when it tapers off, it's not, the way that it's measured is not so concrete as when it as the onset, and the severity is measured by how much you've lost. So I can pinpoint at least one of my last solid memories, which would be at least March 15th, 16th, 17th of 2020. And then it continues through to about February or March of 2021.
So after all of these events?
Yes, correct.
Thank you, nothing further.
Anything?
No.
All right, you may step down. Thank you. Sorry?
Next witness,
Yes.
people call Guy Holland to the stand.
All right. All right, Mr. Holland, if you could raise your right hand.
Do you solemnly state that the testimony you're about to give and the cause now pending before this court should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. Please have a seat. Please state and spell both your first and last name.
First name is Guy, spelled G-U-Y. Last name is Holloman, H-O-L-L-O-M-A-N.
All right, Mr. Harwick.
Yes, Mr. Holloman, can you please tell the jury what it is that you do for a living?
Sure. I'm employed by the City of Los Angeles, Los Angeles Police Department Forensic Science Division as a supervising criminalist.
And can you briefly describe your education, training, and experience to be the supervisor of that particular unit?
Sure. I hold a bachelor's degree in molecular and cell biology from UC Berkeley. And I've had the required training for all of the assigned units that I've served in over the years, DNA, field investigation, as well as narcotics analysis.
How many years have you been a criminalist?
I've been with the department almost 23 years. First years as a lab tech, so almost 22 years.
And how many years as a supervisor?
This October will be 6 years.
Do you supervise, back in 2020, did you supervise criminalist Philip Nahn?
Yeah, I did.
And was he part of your unit?
Yes, sir.
And drawing your attention to the date of February 26, 2020, back then the detectives from West Bureau Homicide, specifically Detective Scott Masterson, contact you about a syringe with liquid that they wanted your unit to analyze.
He did.
And was that a syringe that's here, shown on People's Exhibit number 55, photograph D?
That is correct.
And was Philip Nahn assigned to analyze the liquid within that syringe?
He was.
And did you receive the results of the analysis?
I did.
And how about his graphs and his library searches to try to determine what was inside that liquid?
Yes.
Did you review all those documents?
Yes.
And did you find out that it tested negative for any controlled substances?
Correct.
But there appear to be other possible chemicals there.
That's correct.
Well, I'll have another question without getting specifics about what other substances. Go ahead. The answer stand.
Defense exhibit, double N, page 7. You reviewed these documents also as part of Mr. Nan's analysis?
Yes, sir, I have.
Okay, and looking here at page 7, one of the possible chemicals could have been nicotine.
That is correct.
It could have also been pyridine,
Pyridine.
correct?
That is correct.
And did you, after you received the results that there were no controlled substances in the liquid of that syringe, what did you tell the detectives, if anything?
Well, I told the detectives that the laboratory had the capabilities of detecting controlled substances, and that for anything else contained in that evidentiary item, that he could request at another lab test for any non-controlled substances that might be in that syringe.
Like a nicotine.
Correct.
And why couldn't your lab test for nicotine?
Well, our lab is set up to detect controlled substances, and nicotine is not a controlled substance. We don't have what's called the nicotine reference standard to compare the unknown sample to. So that's why we could not confirm the presence of nicotine in that particular sample.
Nor could you confirm the other chemicals that were shown in the syringe.
That is correct.
And so did you recommend that the detectives take the liquid from that syringe and have it tested by another lab?
Yes.
And which lab did you recommend?
I mentioned the Federal Bureau of Investigation, that their laboratory might have the capabilities of confirming nicotine or non-controlled substances within the syringe.
Why did you recommend the FBI?
I knew that they possibly would test for a larger battery of chemicals that our lab was not capable of confirming.
I have nothing further on.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Holland.
Good afternoon, sir.
There we go. Let me just sit up here. So your lab can, as in this case, can be asked to test to try to see what is in an unknown substance.
That's correct.
I'm going to remove this. And there are specific policies and procedures that are in place for that exact situation.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And that's what happened in this case, right?
Objection vague as to what happened in this case.
A test was done for an unknown substance.
Correct.
Gas chromatography mass spectrometry, GCMS, it's an extremely reliable method for identifying compounds.
Yes.
It's something it's a really well-established analytical tool for criminalists.
That is correct.
It's something that all criminalists in your lab are expected to be able to perform.
No, not necessarily. If there's training required to be able to operate the instrument properly, to maintain it properly, and to analyze the data that comes from that. So there's a training component there. Obviously, once you're trained and found competent in the use of the instrument, then you're at that point expected to be able to use it during analysis.
And GCMS has been in use in your labs in your entire professional career.
Yeah, as far as I can remember, yes.
So I'd like to talk about a procedure that it appears that you actually approved it yourself. This is TMNAU-400 GC/MS. Are you familiar with that?
I am.
And specifically on page 4, there is a sample preparation guideline for unknown substances of this procedure. This is not an exhibit, Your Honor. Or this procedure that you approved. One of the ways that you begin testing an unknown substance.
procedure, maybe it's the time, the procedure he approved when.
Well, I take it, do you know what he's talking about?
I'm not sure yet.
Okay,
Sort of.
Sustain, go ahead.
So, okay, you're familiar with this procedure that I read the name of it earlier, TM space NAU-400.
I'm familiar with it, yes, sir.
Yes. And it was, this procedure is a procedure that is in place to make sure that testing is done correctly in the lab. Right?
Absolutely.
And it was in place in March of 2020.
Correct.
There is a specific section in this procedure that relates to how to, or what requirements are in place to indicate.
Right.
Okay. And what that means, indicate, is that the GCMS test would indicate the presence of a substance, right?
Correct.
So under this procedure, what happens is the sample must be compared to a spectrum of the reference material of a GCMS library or published spectrum, right?
That's correct.
And just to kind of make it less technical, what we're talking about is when a sample is tested by the GCMS instrument, it produces, the instrument produces the results of the test, right?
Correct.
And then what this is talking about is taking those results of the test and then comparing them against libraries of chemical compounds.
Yes.
Okay. And so your lab one of the requirements is that the overall appearance of the sample spectrum must be substantially similar to the reference material spectrum, right?
Correct.
And there must be no substantial unexplained extraneous ions.
That is also correct.
So in the technical notes that the criminalist is writing as a part of the GCMS analysis, these notes are required to have, number one, the name of the library being used for comparison, right?
Correct.
And it says multiple libraries can be used. The criminalist can search through multiple libraries.
Correct.
Number two, the technical notes need to include.
Let me interrupt you. Ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and take a 15-minute break, if you will, please. Back on the record in this manner, Mr. Panzel, you were inquiring.
Before we took our break, Mr. Holloman, I was asking you about the requirements to indicate. Do you recall that?
Okay. I do. And
So,
just so we're clear, we're not talking about confirming, but indicating. Yes.
correct.
Got it.
Indicating. So the first requirement that we were talking about was for the criminalist to include in his or her technical notes the name of the library being used.
Yes.
Okay. And the next requirement is the percentage match assigned by the library.
Yes.
And it says that number should be at or above 80.
That's correct.
The last requirements for the technical notes is the spectral data provided by the library. That should be included in the notes.
Yes.
And you reviewed criminalist Non's notes in this case.
I have.
And he followed the procedure.
He did.
Okay. Now, if a criminalist in your lab follows the procedures that are in place in your lab, and a sample mass spectrum, and there's an indication based on the sample mass spectrum that there is a chemical present, there is a very high likelihood that GCMS indication is accurate.
Injection foundation.
don't know. Is it something you can answer, sir?
It is, and the answer to that is not necessarily.
Okay.
Now, indication is different than identification.
That is correct.
There's a separate procedure for and requirements for identification.
Yes.
And with identification, your lab has reference, I want to make sure I get the right word, reference materials that are in-house, that are present in the lab.
That's correct.
I'm going to check relevance 352 and beyond the scope.
Sustain. Let's move on.
I just want to make sure that it's clear what the difference is between identification and indication.
Well, okay, make that clear and then move on if you would.
So,
Well, let him explain it. Ask him what's the difference. If yeah, be easier to let him explain.
this will not take more than a couple minutes, Your Honor.
Okay, and then leave that area if you would. Go ahead.
So for identification, you have a reference sample that is present in the lab.
Correct.
And there's a lot of requirements for how you obtain that reference sample, how you maintain it, test it, a bunch of stuff, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And so when you have when you have a GCMS result and you want to test it against that reference sample, you can do that in your lab.
You can.
You run the reference sample through the machine.
Vegas to which reference? sample?
Okay, again, he said all you wanted to clarify was what was it? The indication versus what was it?
Versus identification. That's what I'm doing.
Well, no, I mean, let's just get to it. Let's not go through all these steps. Tell them what the difference is. I'll ask the question. What's the difference, sir? Can you explain the two differences? I don't want you to get into each step. What's the difference, sir, if you can?
Yes, sir. Gentleman was on the right track. So
Okay.
an identification or a confirmation involves the use of a reference sample or a known. You compare it to the unknown sample. If they match, then you can identify the unknown. In the case of an indication, there's no reference sample run. It's just compared to the library of chemicals that's already in the database. That's not enough to constitute an identification. So to identify a chemical or a substance, the criminalist has to run a reference sample and compare it to the spectra or data obtained from the unknown.
Is that why your lab could not conclude the nicotine portion of it?
That's correct, Your Honor.
Okay, great, thank you.
And your lab's inability to run that, to complete an identification doesn't take away from the reliability of the GCMS test.
Objection. Argumentative.
No, I'll the answer. Stan, what was your answer, sir?
Absolutely not.
Okay, okay.
All right. So just very briefly, I'd like to talk about the lab where this test occurred. Your lab is the name of it is the Hertzberg Davis Forensic Science Center, right?
That's the name of the facility that we operate out of, yes.
Oh.
Or the main facility. We have a satellite facility called the Piper Technical Facility. Yes.
Sorry, I didn't mean to speak over you. The facility, the Hertzberg Davis Forensic Science Center, that's at Cal State LA, right?
Correct.
And the criminalist laboratory is comprised of 7 specialized units.
All right, let's see. That. We are back on the record in this manner. Mr. Panzel, you were inquiring.
Before we took our break, Mr. Holloman, I was asking you about the requirements to indicate. Do you recall that?
I do. And
So-
just so we're clear, we're not talking about confirming, but indicating. Yes.
Correct.
Got it.
Indicating. So the first requirement that we were talking about was for the criminalist to include in his or her technical notes the name of the library being used.
Yes.
Okay. And the next requirement is the percentage match assigned by the library.
Yes,
And it says that that number should be at or above 80.
that's correct.
The last requirements for the technical notes is the spectral data provided by the library. That should be included in the notes.
Yes,
And you reviewed criminalist Non's notes in this case,
I have.
and he followed the procedure.
He did.
Now, if a criminalist in your lab follows the procedures that are in place in your lab, and a sample mass spectrum, and there's an indication based on the sample mass spectrum that there is a chemical present, there is a very high likelihood that that GCMS indication is accurate.
Injection foundation.
I don't know. Is it something you can answer, sir?
It is, and the answer to that is not necessarily.
Okay.
Now, indication is different than identification.
That is correct.
There's a separate procedure for and requirements for identification.
Yes.
And with identification, your lab has reference, I want to make sure I get the right word, reference materials that are in-house, that are present in the lab.
That's correct.
I'm going to check as relevance 352 and beyond the scope.
Sustain. Let's move on.
I just want to make sure that it's clear what the difference is between identification and indication.
Well, okay, make that clear and then move on if you would.
So,
Well, let him explain it. Ask him what's the difference. If, yeah, be easier to let him explain.
this will not take more than a couple minutes, Your Honor.
Okay, and then leave that area if you would. Go ahead.
So for identification, you have a reference sample that is present in the lab.
Correct.
And there's a lot of requirements for how you obtain that reference sample, how you maintain it, test it, a bunch of stuff, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And so when you have when you have a GCMS result, and you want to test it against that reference sample, you can do that in your lab.
You can.
You run the reference sample through the machine.
Vegas to which reference? sample?
Okay, again, he said all you wanted to clarify was, what was it, the indication versus what was it?
Versus identification. That's what I'm doing.
Well, no, I mean, let's just get to it. Let's not go through all these steps. Tell them what the difference is. I'll ask the question. What's the difference there? Can you explain the two differences? I don't want you to get into each step. What's the difference there if you can?
Yes, sir. Gentleman was on the right track. So
Okay.
an identification or a confirmation involves the use of a reference sample or a known. You compare it to the unknown sample. If they match, then you can identify the unknown. In the case of an indication, there's no reference sample run. It's just compared to the library of chemicals that's already in the database. That's not enough to constitute an identification. So to identify a chemical or a substance, the criminalist has to run a reference sample and compare it to the spectra or data obtained from the unknown.
Is that why your lab could not conclude the nicotine portion of it?
That's correct, Your Honor.
Okay, great, thank you.
And your lab's inability to run that, to complete an identification doesn't take away from the reliability of the GCMS test.
Objection. Argumentative.
No, I love the answer. Stan, what was your answer, sir?
Absolutely not.
Okay, okay.
All right. So just very briefly, I'd like to talk about the lab where this test occurred. Your lab is the name of it is the Hertzberg Davis Forensic Science Center, right?
That's the name of the facility that we operate out of, yes.
Okay.
Or the main facility. We have a satellite facility called the Piper Technical Facility. Yes.
Sorry, I didn't mean to speak over you. The facility, the Hertzberg Davis Forensic Science Center, that's at Cal State LA, right?
Correct.
And the criminalist laboratory is comprised of 7 specialized units.
All right, let's see.
one part of your job is testifying in court about tests like this, right?
Yes,
And you receive training on that, right?
I have.
And you observe you observe people that criminalists that you are supervising sometimes when they testify.
Yes, that's part of the training.
And your testimony by an expert or a criminalist like yourself has to occur under certain parameters, right?
I'd say yes, but I'd ask you to be a little more specific if you can.
Well, for example, the ANAB, ANSI publishes best practices for testimony regarding forensic scientific results.
Objection relevance.
Allow that as foundational, and I will reserve my ruling until I hear the rest of the questions. Go ahead. You can ask. Is that a yes or no?
That is correct. One of those things is making sure that the person testifying stays within the scope of their expertise.
And this body, ANSI and ANAB, they publish best practices like that and other standards to make sure that laboratories and testimony are considered technically competent.
Objection as to other laboratories.
All right.
And foundation.
Rephrase your question.
So this body, can you just explain what is ANSI and what is ANAB?
They're an accrediting body that will conduct assessments of different laboratories to make sure that they are meeting certain technical and calibration guidelines, that they're meeting certain standards.
And meeting those standards is one way for the lab to convey to criminal courts like this that testing procedures follow high standards.
Vegas to which lab are we talking about?
We're talking about your lab, his lab?
Yes, because our lab is accredited by that body.
Right. It has the ISO /IEC 17025 and has for a long time.
Yes.
And that's the standard. It's an international standard that most labs in major countries abide by.
Objection foundation, most labs in most countries.
Sustained.
Relevance.
352, Council.
So you testified that you recommended sending this sample to another lab.
That's correct.
To another lab that would have the reference for nicotine.
Yes. At the time, I was not sure that the FBI could do the testing, but I thought that would be a good place to try. And so I suggested that to the detective.
And you were making a suggestion for additional testing because there was this indicator that there was these substances present.
Not only that, I remember having a conversation that there was some facts derived during the investigation that that substance might be contained within the syringe. So I knew that even before testing it.
Mm. Now, the indication, not the identification, the indication showed nicotine and cotinine, right?
Among others, yes.
Cotinine is is what nicotine breaks down into, the metabolite.
I'm not sure.
Had you had a reference sample in your lab of nicotine, you could have run the test yourself, right?
Objection calling for speculation and relevance.
I'll allow it, since these criminalists training experience. If you had that sample, could you have run that yourself, or is your lab capable of having done so if you had that sample?
We could have run the nicotine drug standard, but I'm not sure if the data itself was of sufficient quality to make a confirmation. I'm not sure about that.
In other words, since you did not have that reference sample present in your lab, that's why you had it sent elsewhere.
Correct.
Nothing further.
Just after council's questions, has your opinion changed that the analysis conducted by your lab by Philip Nahn only detected the possibility of nicotine and these other chemicals?
My opinion has not changed.
Thank you.
Anything based on that question?
When we were talking earlier about the requirements for an indication, one of them is that there is a percentage match assigned by the library that has to be at or above 80, right?
Right.
If it's below 80,
Objection asked and answered.
Let me finish this question.
if it's below 80, then it wouldn't meet the requirements that are in place by your lab. Most likely wouldn't meet.
That's correct, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that indication is not valid. That percentage, because we're not confirming, it's really just a guideline, a line that we drew in the sand as we had to apply some rules to the quality of the spectra produced. But we still couldn't identify it either way. And the lab only performs an indication in special circumstances. In this particular case, there were so many different substances that were indicated, it wouldn't have been signed.
Percentage match was there for the library. The percent match assigned by the library was there.
Objection asked and answered.
Sustained.
And nothing further.
Anything?
No.
All right, sir. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. You can sit down. Thank you. Phoebe?
People call Sarah Bruxton de Quintana.
Please spell the last name.
Buxton, Buxton, then DE, Quintana, Quintana.
All right, I got it. Thank you. All right, ma'am, if you could raise your right hand, please.
You solemnly state that the testimony you're about to give and the cause not pending before this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Thank you. Please have a seat. Please state and spell both your first and last name.
Sarah, Sarah, Buxton de Quintana, BUXTONDEQUINTANA.
Mr. Quintana, could you please tell the jury what it is that you do for a living?
I'm a supervising criminalist at the Los Angeles County Medical Examiner's Office.
And can you briefly describe your education, training, and experience to perform the duties of that position?
Yes, I have a bachelor's of science in biochemistry. I have a master's of science in forensic DNA and serology, and I have worked at that office since 2004 in the laboratory and then later as supervising others.
How many years have you worked as a supervisor?
Worked as a supervisor since 2018.
And on March 6, 2020, were you a supervisor for that division?
Yes, I was.
And was an analysis conducted on a blood sample for an Amie Harwick under coroner case number 2020-01406?
Yes, there was toxicology testing performed.
And who requested this toxicology analysis?
The toxicology was requested by our deputy medical examiner, Dr. Luzzi.
So the deputy medical examiner would be the one to request what type of toxicological analysis will be conducted.
That's correct.
And what was requested by the deputy medical examiner in this case?
He requested a screen that we refer to as an H screen, and the H stands for homicide.
So the homicide screen, what does that entail?
It includes ethanol or alcohol, as well as common controlled substances, drugs of abuse, cannabinoids, marijuana, cocaine, methamphetamine, opiates, PCP, and fentanyl.
So it's alcohol, cocaine and metabolites, fentanyl, marijuana, methamphetamine, opiates like codeine and morphine, opiates like hydrocodone, hydromorphone, and phencyclidine.
Yes, that's correct.
That's fentanyl?
Phencyclidine is PCP.
PCP, I'm sorry. And what were the results? What part of, where does the sample obtain to conduct this analysis?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question.
Where's the sample obtained?
The sample was a sample of chest blood collected by the medical examiner.
And how is it analyzed?
The two separate analyses in this case started off the screening process. One was the ethanol analysis, and the other was the immunoassay screening for the drugs of abuse.
And what was the result of the alcohol screen? Was there any alcohol in the blood of Amie Harwick?
No, there was not. The results were negative.
How about cocaine?
No, there was no cocaine.
How about fentanyl?
No fentanyl.
How about the initial test for marijuana?
The initial test for marijuana was presumptive, but the confirmation testing that was triggered, it did not confirm, and so there was no marijuana.
And how about for methamphetamine?
There was no methamphetamine.
How about opiates like codeine or morphine?
There were no opiates such as codeine or morphine or hydrocodone or hydromorphone.
How about for PCP?
And there was no PCP.
And were you requested to test for nicotine?
No, we were not.
Were you requested to test for any poisons?
No.
And the request you indicated would come from the deputy medical examiner based on his examination.
That's correct.
And it was a report generated with these results on March 6, 2020.
Yes, there was.
And did that report become part of the autopsy report?
Yes, it did.
I have nothing further on it.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Is it significant in evaluating toxicology if there was a death in the hospital as opposed to in the field?
Depends on the length of hospitalization, the time of stay.
What about surgical intervention?
It could be significant if there was blood transfusions or products.
And why would blood transfusion or products be significant in making a toxicology analysis based on blood drawn after a transfusion or any type of medical intervention?
Objection, relevance and foundation.
No, I'll allow it. You can answer.
So first of all, the transfusion could be due to blood loss and therefore loss of substances that may be present. And then transfusion could dilute and or introduce other substances if they were a significant percentage of the blood that was remaining in the now decedent.
And is there a way to try to test around medical intervention by going to the hospital that admitted an individual and asking them for blood samples that were drawn at the time that the person was received at the hospital?
Objection, foundation.
Sustain.
You
You don't have to answer that.
I'm sorry.
It's all right.
Do you know if there is a procedure by the Los Angeles County Department of Medical Examiner Coroner for requests made to hospitals when a decedent actually dies in the hospital for blood drawn prior to surgical intervention or transfusions?
No, I'm not aware.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Anything?
No question.
You may step down. Thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to break at this time. There was 7 witnesses today, so that's good. We'll see you all tomorrow at 9:30. Please don't get sick like I did, and keep wearing the masks if you do. Thank you. We'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you for watching day 4 with me. I'll be here tomorrow with day 5. Thank you and have a great day.